Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, powered by FanDuel. NFL Week 9. A couple of marquee matchups on an otherwise unattractive slate, but we will make the best of a bad situation. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider.
Well, don't confuse it. There's some good games this weekend.
There's
just
a couple.
Not a ton of great betting opportunities.
There's a couple, and I'll say at least we have what appears to be one very good game in the early time slot. I think we have one halfway decent one in the afternoon. And then, of course, the crown jewel on the Week 9 schedule coming in the form of Sunday Night Football as Drew Brees and Tom Brady will run it back from the Week 1 matchup. That was a little bit underwhelming. Busy show on tap today. John Sheeran of FanDuel Sportsbook will drop by. Curious to get his take on exactly what they're seeing behind the counter. We, of course, have our big game breakdowns. And normally, Payne, sometimes on Thursdays, we'll start with a little recap of what we saw on Monday night. But I'm not quite sure that it requires any of that for a particular recap given Monday Night Football.
Can I be completely candid and vulnerable here? I can't remember Monday Night Football. Was that Tampa and the Giants?
It was indeed Tampa and the Giants.
Oh, there we go. Every day is the same in my world. So you start to get things confused a little bit. Oh, yes, you brought up a sore subject there. We went over. Jesus Christ.
You don't even know what side you don't even know what we had in that game. That's how bad it is this morning.
I do now. I remember that GD last drive there.
If we went over, we would have cashed our
under
ticket.
48 the previous Monday. We went a week ahead of that. Yeah, that was a tough drive to watch there, the old 4th and 16 completion. What we saw there was basically, I gotta tell you, the Clapper had a little bit of a decent game plan there. It was creative. And I thought Daniel Jones played somewhat well, did miss a couple opportunities there, but drove his team down the field late, had a chance to tie it up. It's as good as a spot you're going to hope for as a 13-point dog there. It was interesting. I thought it's kind of what we expected. We thought Tampa would try to get out there and just kind of get it done. The number was a little inflated. I think we said we made it 10.9. So there was, some value on the dog there, especially when you consider the spot.
Well, and the other thing that was
That's all I took away from that.
The other thing that was interesting, maybe more so, was Bruce Arians' comments about how we just didn't bring our own energy. We thought the stadium looked closed when we drove up there for a night game. I don't think they're going to make that same mistake this week when they welcome the Saints into their building. Of course, we'll have a lot more on that contest later in the show. But Payne, you want to jump
about that spot too, right? You have the big win against the Packers. You travel out to Las Vegas. You got your division rival on deck looking for a little revenge for Sunday Night Football. That was a real good spot for the Giants. And the Giants had extra time too. I think the Giants are really interesting just in general here as we go really far left, but they've been playing competitive football.
They continue to fight.
You're a 2-point conversion away from tying that. You're an Evan Ingram drop away from beating Philadelphia. Look at some of the teams that they've played this season. And already this week, and I'm not saying it's the right side, but you're seeing value, or at least one group thinking that there's a lot of value on the Giants. Took the 3.5. We're now down through the key to 2.5. So Giants have been playing a little bit better football than the record. The defense has been pretty good under Patrick Graham.
They have exceeded odds makers' expectations with alarming regularity, especially on the road. We'll see if that continues. But unfortunately for those hoping you were going to get a deep dive of the Washington football team and the New York football Giants, you won't be able to hear it on this very podcast. However, we will start with New York's only football team. That, of course, being the Buffalo Bills, who do play their home game in the Empire State, as they'll welcome in the Seattle Seahawks. And Payne, in this game, you're looking at Seattle, a 3-point favorite at FanDuel. Total on this game sits at 55. And when we look at the Seahawks, this is a team on the road that's made people a lot of money. 10-3 straight up, 8-4-1 against the number the last 2+ seasons. Russell Wilson, it doesn't matter what time zone he plays in or what planet he's on. 21-6 straight up, 18-7-2 against the number when he plays in the Eastern time zone. Meanwhile, the Bills, this is a team that's failed to cover numbers as a home underdog, but we'll see if they can reverse that trend. And when you look at this particular matchup, I think a logical place to start is with that high-flying Seahawks offense led by MVP frontrunner Russell Wilson against a Buffalo Bills defense that, for lack of a better term, has underwhelmed throughout the course of the 2020 season.
He's going to beat Patty, isn't he? Even if they're just like equal. I think Ty goes to the runner here because he's been shunned for so many seasons.
Wave the white flag. I mean, if you're talking about Russell Wilson against Patrick Mahomes for the MVP, unless something drastic changes.
Isn't it 1A versus 1B right now?
No, I don't even think it's 1A versus 1B. I think it's 1 versus nobody in 2 and 3, and Patrick Mahomes just trying to finish third right now in the race.
Interesting. Who's 2? Tom?
No, I know. I'm saying that I don't think there is anybody that's even close to Russ has done when you look at his numbers. Not necessarily the yards, but the touchdown production and the narrative that we talked about coming into the season, that he'd never received an MVP vote. It started to gain a little bit of traction, and he clearly makes all the difference in the world for Seattle, maybe even more so than what Mahomes means to Kansas City.
Don't get carried away, but I could see that. Yes,
you're going to win multiple Super Bowls.
Especially considering the coaching staff.
You're going to win more
You're right.
You're going to win more Super Bowls with Kansas City. Mahomes will win another couple MVP awards. It's okay if he doesn't win his second MVP before he turns 25.
Should already have
two
Super Bowls. If
here we go. You know what? He's not playing.
Anyways,
he's not playing in this game. Russell Wilson is though.
He is, and I think you mentioned something pretty cool there, and I dug into some of the numbers because I stumbled upon an article. So you mentioned Russell Wilson. He's done a good job navigating these East Coast trips better than anyone. 24-9 since he was drafted. He's won 10 straight East Coast games, covered almost 71% of these East Coast games. Is really impressive. And so, after digging up that trend, suddenly this article pops up, and I think it was an interview with Bill Simmons. But he talked about spending over $1 million a year on his mind and his body. But specific to the mind, apparently Russ has worked with a mental conditioning expert for over 10 years to help him get in the right mindset. So throughout the game, he's never gotten overly positive or negative. And I think that's probably helped him in chaos. It's helped him in situations like this. It explains why he does so well in some of these negative situations, whether it's, a simple trip East Coast for an early start or coming back from behind with these late drives that we've seen over the seasons. But anyways, when I look at the matchup, I think you hit this right on the head here. This isn't going out on a limb and saying Seattle's offense is probably going to have some success. They're third in passing efficiency. They do well staying balanced enough, even with this revolving door at running back here. Seattle's 8th in rushing efficiency, mostly because they hit big plays in the run game, 7th in explosive runs. Buffalo defensively has been one of the most underwhelming, most disappointing defenses, I think, this season. And we called for regression, but this is really bad. Right now, bottom third of the league against both the run and pass. They've played a below average schedule of offenses, so you're going to see an uptick here in competition. Buffalo's defense has also had some favorable weather situations recently as well, and they're still not good. So, after doing some digging here, it looks like Seattle's probably going to have a real advantage in a lot of places, but one that I could pinpoint was first down, where 60% of their plays have graded successful. If you look specifically on first down from 3 wide sets, Russell Wilson's been pretty electric, 113 passer rating. If Seattle runs it on first down from 3 wide sets, which is really where you want to be running from because it spreads the defense out, they're averaging 5.8 a carry. Buffalo defensively on first down is allowing 57% of passes to grade successful from 3 wide sets, 5.4 a carry. So it just says to me that Russell Wilson, the Seahawks offense, can be pretty comfortable in this one because they're not going to have, too many negative situations to be dealing with on 2nd and long or 3rd and long because they're going to be really successful, I would think, on first down. At least all indications point to that. Even the one spot, Todd, where I think there's been some question marks over the years about Seattle's offense is protecting Russ. Kind of joked about it in the offseason that Pete had 17 linemen on the roster. He was going to make sure he found the right 5 this season. And it's not elite, I don't think, but it's made a lot of good strides. And not only are we seeing the depth kind of help facilitate the trade for Carlos Dunlap, but on the field, Seattle's offensive line, I think, is a little bit upgraded. Right now, they're playing, to my mind, better than what the talent is. But Seattle's 5th in pass block win rate. Buffalo's bottom half of the league in pressure rate. So I don't even think you can get pressure on Russ this week. And what's interesting is I think McDermott knows he doesn't have the guys along the defensive line, so he blitzes at the 7th highest rate in the league. Russell Wilson, year in, year out, one of the very best quarterbacks against the blitz. He's going to make you pay. So there's just a lot of opportunity here for Seattle's offense. It's nothing that no one doesn't already know when they look at this matchup and you see a total at 55. But I think there's a lot of ways, obviously, Seattle is going to attack Buffalo. If Buffalo can at least hold their own on first down, then it's probably a game that's going to see some points here for sure. And Seattle may come out victorious. One thing I did see with the number here, so I initially came into this thinking, hey, I'm going to make a case for Buffalo here as a dog.
Same boat.
You were in the same boat? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly my thought process. I'm going, hey, this is a spot where I think I'm going to want to try and play Buffalo.
Yeah, did see a little money come in at -2.5, -0.5 on the favorite here. It's why we're out to 3 basically across the board.
This is going to be a DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett game.
You would think with Tre'Davious White,
it's got to be Tyler, right?
A Tyler Lockett game. However, I believe I was reading an article, and you caught me on the spot here, but my memory, which is typically bad, remembers this, which, again, just another day in my life. But somehow, Buffalo is 31st in the league defending number 1 wide receivers, which was odd to me.
Wow. Poor Tre'Davious, falling on hard times out there.
Well, no, he's very good.
With the injuries taking a toll.
Good. I just don't, it's got to be a team thing, or teams are kind of being smart and moving their horse around the field to find better matchups.
Yeah, I think you have to scheme
Which
guys.
Is something, by the way, we didn't see last week.
From the Tennessee Titans?
The Tennessee Titans offense.
Just line up your top wide receiver with their top cover corner and not try and force them to travel once all game.
I saw that. It was like hilarious. Someone tweeted that the Titans basically shadowed their own number 1 receiver.
Hey, the fastest way to take yourself out of a game is to self-handicap, and the Titans did an effective job of that in their loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. On the other side of the ball, Payne, we've talked about the much-maligned Seahawks defense. They looked a lot better for the better part of 3 quarters last week against San Francisco. Don't be fooled by that final score. They were in Jimmy Garoppolo's kitchen, more or less from start to finish. They do add Carlos Dunlap. I imagine he'll be on a bit of a snap count. We're keeping tabs on Jamal Adams, who we think should be able to go. But I guess the bigger question, too, what's gone wrong with this Buffalo offense? I mean, they were lighting the world on fire early, but for 3 straight games up until their 24-point outburst, and I say that facetiously against the Patriots, they hadn't scored more than 20 points in 3 straight football games.
I think the first thing that comes to people's minds when they're going to think about this matchup is obviously Jamal Adams. He's going to return. Pete says he was a full go at practice yesterday. He's been chomping at the bit to get back. You mentioned Carlos Dunlap. He'll be contributing. It's possible that Snacks Harrison gets a few snaps. For me, when I look at this, I believe we're finally going to see the Buffalo offense that's closer to the one from the beginning of the season. And listen, we've been on the Brian Daboll train for a while, but we were also the first ones to say after about 3 or 4 weeks, a lot of what Josh Allen's doing right now isn't sustainable. He's going to regress from the first few weeks, and sure enough, like Allen's come back to reality, but he's still very much improved. He was just playing at a rate that just, is not something that's sustainable at all. The key to this side of the ball and why we've seen this total go from 51 to 55 is because Buffalo's offense hasn't been in many advantageous spots recently. And there was an anomaly performance mixed in there. But if you go back and think about this, they play the Titans on a short week game that was impacted by COVID. Brian Daboll doesn't know who he's game planning for. The league was like, we're not sure if it's going to be Tennessee or if it's going to be Kansas City. So Buffalo prepared 2 different offenses for 2 different opponents. And then you only hang 16 points against the Titans. There was also rain in that game. Then Buffalo plays the Chiefs on a short week against a great pass defense, but there's also rain and wind in that game. Buffalo has this, get right spot against the Jets. And if you just look at the scoreboard, it's like, Jesus, only 18 points. But there is an important distinction is that, Josh Allen and Buffalo's offense marched up and down the field all day. Buffalo didn't punt a single ball in that game. They only score 18 after 6 field goals. And then last week, you get New England. It's another weather game with both wind and rain, and it was clear that was going to be the case from the onset, right? That total comes down from, as high as 48, 47.5 down to 40.5 before we saw some buyback plus a differing viewpoint on that game. But it was a full touchdown move. Brian Daboll saw from, a week out in advance there's going to be weather there. So you noticed he went with a more run-heavy offense because of that weather. If you look this week, it's a beach day in Buffalo, baby. Like, it's 65 degrees, clear skies, and no wind in November. You're going to bring the wings out to whatever land of water you have there. It's a good day in Buffalo. So I think we're going to see here is Brian Daboll is going to be smart enough to know that Seattle is stout against the run, and they're pretty lackluster against the pass. Seattle's 30th in defensive pass efficiency, 28th in passing success rate defense, bottom third in the league in the NFL in pressure rate, trending even worse. That's why they go make the move for Carlos Dunlap. This just feels like a bounce back spot for Buffalo's offense here.
Yeah, you'd think that somewhere along the way we're going to get flashes of good Josh Allen. And what we saw early on in the season, he was outstanding. Started the season 4-0, 12 touchdown passes, 1 interception. You mentioned it over the last 4 games, 2-2, 4 touchdown passes, and 4 interceptions. Buffalo, of course, had that big win last week against New England, get the monkey off their back in the division. We'll see how they're able to handle a little bit of prosperity up there in Western New York. Payne, working under the assumption, I know we said it's more running back by committee. Chris Carson, game time decision, I think pretty much the expectation that all of us are under.
I don't know. What I was hearing was that they would, and maybe it's a game time decision. Maybe this is just an internal thing, but they were internally going to make a decision by Friday. But they liked what DJ Dallas provided. They have Travis Homer there as well. So I think they feel pretty content, and we know that they're more of a pass-happy team this season, which is very smart. Let Russ cook. But yeah, we'll have to monitor the Chris Carson situation. Obviously, that would be a big boost and a get back for that offense.
You always want all your firepower when you look at a total that's moved 4 points in a game, and of course, bigger implications for those fantasy owners out there.
Is supposed to be trending towards potentially being back. I don't know if it's going to be this week, but he's trending in the right direction. Mr. Penny.
Rashad, it's about time. Get him off the scrap heap. Let's go, kid. Get out there and earn your paycheck. You know I support my Mountain West guys.
There you go.
All right.
Worth all that draft capital.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's worth any of that draft capital, but that's a different discussion for a different day. All right. From Buffalo and Seattle to a game where Mother Nature will not be able to impact the outcome of the contest. The Baltimore Ravens, fresh off their loss against the Pittsburgh Steelers, are on the road at Lucas Oil Stadium to take on the Indianapolis Colts. The Ravens, a 1.5-point road favorite. Total in this game, 46.5 at FanDuel. And when you look at Baltimore, they've been dynamic on the road as well. 14-5 the last 19 games away from home, 13-6 against the spread. However, the Ravens' lone win this season over a team with a winning record, unless I struggle with arithmetic, came way back in Week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. And Payne, we now know officially that Marlon Humphrey will miss. There's a lot of contact tracing going on throughout this Ravens football team, specifically on the defensive side, which could bode well for a Colts offense that's rediscovered its swagger, led by Father Time and Phillip Rivers.
That's why this line has come down. That's for sure. It's because of the Ravens' defense. You mentioned Marlon Humphrey, arguably the best cover corner in football. In the way the Ravens play defense, they're reliant on good cover corners in the secondary because they play gobs of man and they blitz. And, it's probably something I'll touch on here in a minute. But because of the contact tracing, 7 other players that were in contact with Humphrey are even in the protocol. Huge names on defense, too, right? It's Matthew Judon, it's Patrick Queen, it's LJ Fort, Tyus Bowser, Malik Harrison, Deshaun Elliott, and Terrell Bonds. All of these guys are defensive players for the Ravens. 5 of them are key contributors. So, again, all of those guys could play. The ones that are in contact tracing, Humphrey is out. But at minimum, Humphrey's out, and these 7 other guys have been away from the facility this week. So it's still worth something. What I saw when I'm looking at this side of the ball, and it's, you have to project this out, right? Your game theory, your game flow, how is this going to go? And we can probably project here, Todd, that the Colts offense probably is going to be one-dimensional here. Indianapolis has not been able to run the ball this season. They're 31st in rushing efficiency overall. Indy's played the second easiest schedule of defenses, too. And it's just absolutely shocking to me because the Colts invested all this money in the offensive line, and they're getting 0 push in the ground game. 28th in adjusted line yards, slightly above average in run block win rate. It just hasn't been good enough. So what this is kind of leading me to here is this is going to be a game on Phillip Rivers' shoulders, and I'm sure some people are like, ugh, that might not be good. When you start to gauge that part of the matchup, the Ravens play man a lot, as I alluded to, 6% above league average. Phillip Rivers has been significantly better against man. His passing success rate, 57% against man, 48% against zone. Rivers' yards per pass attempt increased 1.3 yards against man. He's averaging 8.7 yards per pass attempt against man. EPA, significantly better against man as well. So from that perspective, the matchup isn't horrible. The other part to the passing game is we know the Ravens love to send pressure. Baltimore is 4th best in the NFL in pressure rate. And this may actually shock people because Rivers isn't mobile, and we all have this image of him in the pocket kind of just chucking it as guys are rushing in.
Yeah,
But
the
Phillip
chuck and
Rivers-
duck, full-blown turtle. Like, chuck it and then try and protect yourself like you're dealing with a tornado or a hurricane.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's immobile, and he's got these 2 big knee braces, and it's just like, get it out of the hands. But what's really interesting here is through 8 weeks, Phillip Rivers is the number 1 quarterback with pressure in the NFL. And, he's the 5th quickest release time. And that's what's important here. He gets the ball out quick. He's got a 109 passer rating under pressure. That's number 1 in the NFL. Rivers' adjusted completion percentage under pressure, 79%. Only Breeze and the Beard, Fitzpatrick, are better among qualifying quarterbacks. So this is really interesting because they're probably not going to be able to run the ball here much. It's going to be on Rivers, and he's going to have to be excellent under pressure like he's been all season. The other thing that you have to like just a little bit here is Rivers is starting to get some of his weapons back healthy. Michael Pittman Jr. returned last week. I think he probably plays more snaps this week. Mo Alley Cox came back. Trey Burton, which was his favorite target in camp, starting to get acclimated back into the offense. Marcus Johnson has come on strong as he's been forced into action with all these injuries. Naheem Hines, a little bit bigger part of the pass game. So the weapons are starting to look better here for Indy as well on offense, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, and that was apparent last week. I mean, you saw some of the throws that Phillip Rivers had, and that some of that momentum carried forward in comeback mode, and whether it was a wake-up call that they needed, erasing the deficit against the Bengals. You mentioned the fact that the Colts' ground game has been more or less non-existent. Jordan Wilkins did give them a little bit of a spark. We're not quite sure how healthy he is coming into this week, but as we talk about the Colts' offensive line, still no issues in pass protection. They've only surrendered 8 sacks this season. So you have to think part of that contributes to Rivers feeling confident if he steps into throws with those guys protecting him. When you look at this game pain on the other side of the ball and try and figure out what's ailed the Baltimore Ravens offense all season, a lot of people will see, hey, look, this is an Indianapolis Colts defense that's been outstanding. It's really overachieved. I think they're obviously better than what they were last year, but I'm still extremely skeptical of how good they truly are. But the Ravens, hey, something isn't clicking right now, and whether it's the passing game, or something a little bit deeper there. Can the Ravens have success moving the football down to down against this Colts defense?
I think we could see a Baltimore bounce back offensively. And, I'm not blind here. Like, it's clear the Ravens offense has regressed year over year. But I think last week's results are making people get a little nutty. I mean, sure, like Lamar Jackson made some mistakes. That's it. Baltimore's offense went up and down the field, nearly 460 yards of offense. Baltimore outgained Pittsburgh by more than double the yards. And you look at some of those historical trends, it was just the second time since 1933 that a team ran for 250 yards, outgained their opponent by more than 2-1, and lost. It was like over a 200-game sample. Baltimore was the second team to ever lose in that scenario, but they still scored 24 points. And if you actually dig into it, Lamar fumbles at the Pittsburgh 8 2 different times. Before half, Baltimore's driving. They settle for 3 because the time runs out, not because Pittsburgh stopped them. So I think you get some value here from that perspective. There's a few things in this game that are interesting. I think all week we are going to hear, to your point, Todd, how great the Colts defense is, specifically their run defense. And no doubt it's good. Indy's 5th in defensive rush efficiency. Darius Leonard's back. He changes them significantly. But Indianapolis has played the second easiest schedule of offenses. I've said like multiple times, I don't think this unit is as good as the numbers indicate. And I am like, I'm Team Colts. So, and what we really saw is, Baltimore, what they're facing is, was the most efficient run defense in the league last week in Pittsburgh. So this isn't going to be like a shock to their system either. And they go for 5.6 a carry and a 57% rushing success rate against Pittsburgh. And right now, Todd, and I'm sure you're happy to hear this, we've both been kind of banging the table for J.K. Dobbins. It's been going on for weeks.
Get him the damn rock already.
I truly believe that this guy can provide a different element to the Ravens offense. 20% of Dobbins' carries have gone for 10 or more yards. Dobbins has forced a missed tackle on 33% of his runs. It's number one in the NFL among qualifying running backs with at least 50 touches. So I know everyone's waiting for Mark Ingram to come back, and sure, he's going to be nice. But like the Gus Edwards thing, we need more touches for Dobbins, and I think it changes their offense a little bit more. The part of the Ravens offense right now that's at least being criticized the most the past game, and I get it, it's good reason. Lamar has been a little shaky in spots, not the best decision-making, obviously. But this feels like a decent situation to throw the ball matchup-wise. Right now, the Colts defense, run by Matt Eberflus, they play zone 76% of the time. NFL average for defenses playing zone is 62% through week 8. If you look at Lamar, he's been better against zone when you look at passing success rate and yards per pass attempt. Lamar's passing success rate is 6% higher. His yards per pass attempt more than 4 yards higher against zone. So I think it bodes well to at least see a slight uptick offensively through the air. What's interesting here is, sometimes we can overanalyze these things, and, you're trying to at least put yourself in the best spots and kind of accumulate all of these tiny advantages in your favor, and hopefully that can help out. But this game is being played indoors on a fast track. Baltimore's offense is played with no wind, no rain, and indoors just once all season. They scored 33 in that game. The Colts defense hasn't seen anything like this. Their average efficiency rank of offenses played is 22nd. And meanwhile, you have Baltimore again coming off this game against, the second best defense in the league. It just feels like one of these teams is used to this level of competition. The other one is not. Now, it's tough to say these things. I'm pro Baltimore's offense here. I don't know what to expect from their defense. And so, I'm sure after you hear that, people are going to run and think he likes Baltimore here. But the reason this is moving is mostly because of the Ravens' defensive question marks with Marlon Humphrey out and 7 other guys on the COVID watch list. I'm not making a case for Baltimore in the game, although there's probably value in this number. Was the look at 4? I'm just.
I don't think it was that high. I want to say
Baltimore's offense
3 minus 20 on the look ahead,
here.
but
yeah, I just think Baltimore's offense does well here. I think the narrative is that they absolutely stink and they're facing this brick wall defense. And I don't think that's the case, and I think others would probably agree, and it's why this total has gone from 44.5 out to 47.
Kind of wish this game was pushed back to the afternoon time slot, or at least one of them, knowing that we have a trio of games that don't add a ton of intrigue going on after 1 o'clock Eastern, but 'tis the world we live in as far as the National Football League. But Sunday Night Football, Payne, will not lack any intrigue. And that, of course, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers welcoming in the New Orleans Saints. Tampa, a 4.5-point favorite at FanDuel. Total on the game, 51.5. Totals come down a little bit from where it opened. Maybe some weather potentially in the forecast. But when you look at the New Orleans Saints, this team does nothing but cover as an underdog. 7-1, both straight up and against the spread as a dog over the last 3 seasons. Both, of course, best in that particular category. They've been dynamic and dynamite at the betting window when they go out on the road, 14-5 against the spread. They don't lose close games, 11-2 in one-score games over the last 2 seasons, 4-1 in that department this year. Meanwhile, Tampa on the other side, they're continuing their quest for the first division title since 2007, and they're 6-1 since losing to the Saints back in week 1. Best point differential at 93 and turnover differential of +9 in the National Football League in that span. This game has so many different ways to try and tackle it, Payne. I'm not sure if you wanted to start with the Saints offense, who might get some key cogs back against this Buccaneers defense, or we should be talking about Tommy Terrific against the Saints defense that for large stretches this season has not lived up to some of the lofty expectations heaped on them before the season started.
I think probably the Saints offense is the best place to start, and why this game is trending down aside from just the value in the number and why we've seen this go from 5.5, even a few rare 6s out there, down to 4 where we sit is because the Saints offense and some of the guys that they could potentially be getting back. And you're hoping that it's going to ail some of the Saints' weaknesses on offense. And we've talked about this for years, and I think we actually came up with this name, but basically the Saints are running a phone booth offense right now. It requires you to be uber efficient down to down. There's just no room for error because you're not hitting any explosive plays. And the Saints right now, 26th in explosive play rate. Only 4% of Drew Brees' throws this season have been more than 20 yards down the field. It's pretty wild. And, honestly, like, give credit to Sean Payton for having this team 5-2. But the point here is I think help is on the way, right? Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders are both back practicing. Hopefully Thomas plays. I think there's more going on there than meets the eye of just the injury. But I think he's got a shot to play. This would be the game that you kind of put your differences aside because it's so impactful of a game. Kamara is dealing with a little bit of a bone bruise in his foot, but I'm hearing more precautionary than, it could be troubling. So I don't think it's a big thing, but we'll probably see him out there. So my point here is I think the offense probably opens up a little bit for the Saints. If you remember, though, back in week 1, Sanders and Thomas both played in that first matchup. And the Bucs defense shut them down, really. Saints averaged 4.1 yards per play, and they held the Saints offense to a success rate 6% below their season average. And the one spot that you want to really, I think, focus in here is Tampa Bay defensively has done a very good job defending short to intermediate passes, which is really relevant, obviously. On all throws, 0 to 14 yards, doesn't matter if it's left, center, or the right side of the field. Tampa Bay has allowed a passer rating of 85 on those throws, picked off 6 passes, and only allowed 5 touchdowns within that window. So, overall, Tampa's got the most efficient pass defense in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see, hopefully, if Emmanuel Sanders is back and Michael Thomas is back, that the Bucs defense isn't going to be able to just squat on these passes, because if that's the case, probably could be a long day for the offense. Tampa Bay's done a pretty good job limiting catches to tight ends as well, but something we spoke about Monday, I believe, is that when they do give up the catch, tight ends are doing some damage. And we saw that with Evan Ingram a little bit. Tampa's only allowed 59% of tight end targets to be caught, but they're giving up 10.6 yards per reception to tight ends. And it's because I think, Tampa likes to blitz, number one, right? Second most blitz-heavy defense. And they're typically sending their speed linebackers on the blitz. So if you have to, defend the blitz, right, pick up the blitz, and then attack where the blitz is coming from, which, again, typically the linebackers. So you got to get Jared Cook going. You got to capitalize with Alvin Kamara out of the backfield. Tampa's allowed 51 receptions to running backs, third most in the NFL. Dumping it off to the tight ends quickly, that could help Brees when the pressure comes. One thing that's interesting is Brees hasn't been as good this season with pressure. Typically, we've talked about this, right? Don't send the blitz. Pressure impacts him if it's straight on, but he's typically, once he sees the pressure, he's dumping it off quick and accurately. That kind of plays into his hands. But right now, Brees has a 79 passer rating under pressure. The other thing that is worth mentioning right now, and we're looking at this game, 18-mile-per-hour winds. That's partly why we've seen this total come down despite the Saints 7-0 to the over. But the other thing that we have talked about, I think kind of loosely on this podcast, we don't want to, we try to divulge as much as we can, but typically we have seen historical trends that the second matchup of the season for a division game trends a little bit lower. So we have seen very, very sharp money on this under, partly because of the wins, partly because of the matchup, partly because it's the second time these teams have seen each other in, 8-9 weeks.
You mentioned Alvin Kamara, and I think everybody out there knows how good he's been, but I was blown away, Payne, with some of the numbers that he's actually produced this season as the Saints' primary offensive weapon, given the myriad of injuries they've suffered to skill position players. He's posted 100-plus yards from scrimmage in 6 straight games. No other player in the NFL has had more than 3 straight games in that particular category. 30 more targets than any other Saints player on the roster so far this season. And the Saints doing this year what they seem to do every year, protecting the football. Only 5 giveaways all season long. And one last thing before we shift to the other side of the ball. You mentioned this Bucs secondary and how they rate. You watch more football than anybody. Is it me, or do you feel that they're a little bit overrated in terms of what kind of coverage ability they have in Jamal Dean and Carlton Davis as cover corners? I feel these guys are always vulnerable to the big play, and Antoine Winfield, while he's been great, is still a rookie. I still have question marks about how good this Bucs secondary truly is.
Well, it's a couple things. One, the Bucs get a ton of pressure, so it helps the secondary, obviously. Two, I think we talked about this in the offseason, that the secondary was going to have to make the leap. A bunch of young kids back there, the youngest secondary in football. But they were going to see more passes this year because they have Tom Brady and they're going to be leading in more games. So I think visually that might be what's skewing your mindset as you're watching them give up more completions and more yards because teams are playing from behind. That's part of it. But in terms of overall efficiency, still the number one pass defense in the NFL. And I think when you go into a game like you do Monday night, one, Bruce Arians talked about the energy being down. But two, you're hoping that you're going to make Daniel Jones beat you, right? Make him be accurate. You're not going to give him the deep ball, although, geez, they did towards the end of the game to Golden Tate. But you want to see if he can be accurate down to down. You want to make a Giants offense go 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards a pop. You don't want to give them the big explosive over the top because that's something that they haven't shown an ability to do is consistently drive the football. So you're going to play a little softer in coverage there. So that's, metrically very, very good pass defense.
Hey, it makes sense. And you're right. When you talk about Daniel Jones and some of the poor decisions he made, I'm still not quite sure who he was throwing those footballs to. Handcuffed the Giants a little bit. Ultimately, like we said, coming up just 2 points short with that errant 2-point conversion. You can say what you want about the officials picking up the flag one way or another.
Even
Tom
if you
Brady,
look at efficiency, for instance, right? That's like the combination of down-to-down success and then the explosive plays you allow. But even if you don't even look at efficiency and you just look at something like passing success rate defense, Tampa Bay is still 5th in the league in that. So this is a solid defense pretty much everywhere. What we would have liked to have seen, though, Todd, is Bruce Arians not treat his timeouts like they were Bitcoins. Because
it's a valuable commodity, Payne.
After pass rushing 9 straight plays, it would have been nice to maybe call a timeout so you can get your defensive linemen a little breather. So the biggest advantage your defense has is pressuring the quarterback. Maybe giving them a little blow so Daniel Jones isn't just back there having all day in the pocket last couple passes.
Is that a veiled financial advice that you're trying to give out to our listeners, telling them to invest in the crypto market as well?
Good day today.
We need more days like this. Let's put it that way. And then the podcast shelf life, we might not have more than a 3 to 5 year runway left. So our listeners might not be rooting for Bitcoin to climb to the moon.
I got a text, so I'm not going to lie. I zoned out there, but it sounded like you were saying that Bitcoin going up could be a bad thing for other things in our country.
No, it could be bad for our listeners because it means we can retire sooner.
Gotcha.
That's all I was saying. We know it's an anti-inflationary component.
Yes.
Of the monetary system. Other side of the ball, the Bucs offense against the Saints defense. Tom Brady playing at a very high level. Obviously has had this game circled, you'd imagine, since he didn't come out lighting the world on fire in his Bucs debut. You look at Tampa, they scored on 5 straight possessions to close out the Giants. The last 6 games for Tom Brady, 17 touchdowns, 1 interception. They will get Antonio Brown back in the fold. How prominently he factors into the game plan remains anybody's best guess. But over the last 2 weeks, you have seen the Bucs ground game kind of slow down a little bit. Ronald Jones had strung together 3 straight games of 100 plus on the ground, but running back by committee didn't exactly pay dividends to show them balance. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Saints defense, they've been good against the run, but Payne, they've really struggled to slow down some passing attacks. You'd have to imagine Tampa's going to be able to have some success throwing the football if Mother Nature doesn't ultimately rear her ugly head.
I think so. And it'll be interesting to see, right? We kind of talked about this at the onset of the season. What is the identity of the Tampa Bay offense? They're not quite sure what they want to be. Is this going to be a 3 wide set, chuck and duck? Can they play from 2 tight end formations? And while Antonio Brown's going to be a huge help because he's just that good, you just wonder if there's enough mouths to feed here and what they plan to be doing offensively. And so that will be interesting to see how they choose to implement Antonio Brown. But when I look at some of the advantages that Tampa could have in this game, using 2 tight end sets might be the way to go. And right now the Buccaneers have used 2 tight end sets about 25% of snaps. And if you look at Brady, 59% passing success rate and a 120 passer rating when throwing from 2 tight end sets. The Saints defense, for whatever reason, they've struggled to defend tight ends this season. They've allowed a 55% passing success rate, 10.8 air yards per attempt from these 2 tight end sets. So I think that's one thing to look for here, even with Antonio Brown back, especially with Rob Gronkowski. It feels like he's starting to get acclimated to football again. Him and Brady have been on the same page a little more frequently in recent weeks. The other thing that we want to look for here is the play action deep shots from those 2 tight end sets for Brady and Tampa. We've seen that, I think, repeatedly this season. The way they want to take these shots downfield is off play action from these heavier sets. And Brady's been fantastic throwing with play action, even though Tampa doesn't use it all that much. I believe right now Brady is throwing with play action about 19% of the time. But when he does, they are hunting big plays. 10.3 yards per pass attempt, 6 touchdowns, and a 126 passer rating for Tom off of play action. So look for that little change up here. Obviously, when you have that slew of weapons outside, you're going to see a lot of 3 wide sets. But when they do go to the heavier formations, look for some deep shots here. Could pay dividends, especially to the tight end maybe. 2 other things that kind of interest me and that you actually have to look at when you're dealing with a Tom Brady-led team is situational football. And I think sometimes, Todd, that's kind of why we had trouble assessing the Patriots for all those years and why they continued to cover spreads is because of situational football. And that's big. So when I looked at this game, 3rd downs, red zone, when there's not much separating these teams, those are the things that you need to execute properly. Right now, the Buccaneers offense is above league average in 3rd down success rate. The Saints defense has had a hard time getting off the field on 3rd down, 24th in 3rd down success rate allowed for New Orleans defense. The other thing that you have to look at is, again, the red zone. The Saints defense, for whatever reason, dead last in the NFL in the red zone. New Orleans allowed 83% of trips to the red zone end up in touchdowns. Tampa Bay, 3rd in the NFL converting their red zone trips into touchdowns, a 77% clip. So I have struggled with with New Orleans defense this season, because when you look at the metrics, right, you're looking, 7th overall in defensive efficiency, 9th against the pass, 13th against the run, and this seems like a pretty well-balanced defense. But they're struggling in certain situations. They're not getting the pressure that they got last year from the defensive line. The secondary's given up some big plays. Situationally, they've been bad in the red zone and on 3rd down, and it's why a lot of their games are going over, despite some of the efficiency metrics looking good. I think what you are hoping for is, water to meet its level, a little bit of a regression. We know, Todd, that 3rd down defense, red zone defense isn't necessarily predictable. It's not sustainable. It's pretty fluky. So I think if, you start to get New Orleans to clean up some of those areas, the defense could actually start playing to a level that meets some of their metrics.
No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, you watch this Saints team and you continue to go, hey, look, are they going to resemble the team defensively that we saw for large stretches last year? But even in the playoff game against the Vikings, a lot of the things you just outlined and elaborated on reared their ugly head. And I think when you step up in class and you play teams that have decent quarterback play, it can beat you in a variety of ways. You have to be buttoned up every single aspect of what you're doing. And if it's not there every down, you ultimately pay the price for it. When we look at this number, Payne, are you surprised that there's been as much money that's come in on the Saints as there has been so far, that we're down to that 4.5 range?
I'm not surprised, because you're looking at this game, right? The look ahead last week was 5.5, 6. Tampa Bay doesn't exceed expectations on Monday night. And I'm sorry, the look ahead line was 4. It reopens 5.5, 6. And Tampa Bay doesn't meet expectations on Monday night. So I was a little surprised where it opened, especially considering that all signs would point to Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders being back. So that's kind of why you've seen one group get out ahead, take the Saints. We're now down to soft 4 some places. So I'm not quite sure where this is going to close, but certainly pros have come in on the Saints and the under here so far this week.
Makes some sense for sure. Game that I know both of us can't wait to watch on Sunday night to see two of the best in the business do battle and have major playoff ramifications within the NFC. We do have one game still to get to, Payne, and it's lost a little bit of its luster given all the injuries and the COVID situations prevalent in Green Bay and San Francisco. But before we break that down in great detail, it's time to welcome in our friend of the program. He joins us every Thursday here on the Bet the Board podcast. You, of course, can follow John Sheeran on Twitter. That's at JSheeran, SHEERAN 1981. And John, normally we dive right into the NFL or some of the marquee games in the college football landscape, but did want to pick your brain a little bit since we know federal elections are territory here in the States. But how big an event is it for the company in terms of overall international handle?
I mean, it's absolutely huge, Todd. I mean, I've never really seen the demand for a foreign market kind of parallel to what the election has been, not just this year, but also in 2016. Amazing demand for it. I think in 2016, the Betfair exchange in Europe basically turned over 210,000 British pounds, and I think this year it was in excess of $500 million US. So more than double the handle that we saw in 2016. And then you add to it kind of a position where we can, legally take bets on it on the sports books, not just in Ireland and the UK, but also the brands that we have in Australia. And what we saw was a huge demand for Donald Trump as about a 2-1 underdog. I would say something in the realms of 90% of the bets that we took were on Trump. And obviously that had us sweating at about 1 a.m. Eastern time on the night of the election. But obviously it all seems to have worked its way out to a position where he's about 1-8 right now, Joe Biden, to actually get the office. And that'll be a pretty good result for the group overall.
Going to be interesting to see if there's a gradual push from a lot of states to make that legal here in the States. So it's fascinating to hear some of those numbers and kind of put it in football context from a Super Bowl standpoint, knowing that it really blows it away on an international scale and scope. But that's about as political as we get around these parts, unless, Payne, you had any particular follow-ups here.
John, I just wanted to ask one question. Obviously, like, how will you handle the payout of that situation? Is it going to go just based on votes? Like if Trump decides to take this the legal route and it's decided in his favor, how are you going to handle in terms of paying out the players that way? Will you have a final decision just based upon what's been voted on, or?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
The rules of the market basically state that once the state declares the winner, and obviously once it adds up to 270 in electoral votes, that is the decision. So no litigation could change the ruling. Now, obviously, if there is fundamental reasons for it, and we feel that bettors have been unfairly treated, or there was proven case, you might look to give a goodwill gesture to those customers that have lost out. A couple of our brands actually have already paid out on Joe Biden as well. So look, I keep saying this, and I guess people never really believe it until they actually get the money in their wallets, but where there's been a miscarriage of justice, or we feel like people haven't been fairly treated when it came to their wager, we do always try to have their back, and at least give them their money back as a free bet, or whatever we can do depending on the situation and what the regulations are in any jurisdiction globally. So I mean, I'm excited. You touched on the numbers as well, Todd. I have spoken to regulators here about a desire to potentially start to offer political betting. Some of the regulators are kind of open to it. They don't maybe want to go into it straight away and get their feet wet immediately, but I don't see any way we don't see, election, maybe even as soon as the next presidential election in the US, because there's just too much demand for it. The consumers want it. When they see the numbers that I'm able to share with them from Europe, it's got to kind of try and sway them, I think, in the run up to the next election, where they don't feel that political pressure within the state, I would say.
Just show them the viewership count.
Yeah, seriously.
I was going to say those numbers are absolutely staggering, but Payne, I will say, if John's wishes come to fruition 4 years from now and you are able to bet on the presidential election, I may have to recuse myself from that podcast. So I'm going to let political types jump in there to try and break it down in its entirety. But no, from a wagering standpoint, I'm stunned, quite frankly, John, when you see how much it's grown in 4 years and what it's meant. Because for someone that's apolitical on a variety of topics, you couldn't have asked me political odds for any event transpiring in Europe or around the world, and I could spout off a price. So very interesting to hear the kind of attention it garners, probably more so than Thursday Night Football, a game that's been on the board, it's been off the board. How big a headache is it to deal with the 49ers and Packers, knowing that neither team may have a lot of skill position players available?
Yeah, I mean, COVID this week has really kind of got us, I guess. We've seen Stafford now on a COVID list. A couple of the teams have had to close down the practice facilities in the last day. So, yeah, it is causing us a bit of a headache, but none more so than the bettors and the handicappers. From my perspective, we all get the information at the same time. We try to put as many of the games on the board as we do, and this one's been no different. The market in this one was really interesting because we took a lot of pro money at 4.5 and 4 on the Niners. And that was with all those injuries. Admittedly, it was ahead of the COVID declarations that we saw in the early part of this week. But that was really interesting to me because they're just so banged up. Outside of COVID, it was hard for me to kind of see why the line would move towards the Niners. It looks like a game where, Aaron Rodgers is just going to dominate, and that seemed to be the way it was going. And then all of a sudden we took all this pro money for the Niners, and obviously they've landed in a bad spot, obviously getting hit by COVID. And I think we spoke about that at the start of the year, that there's, always this potential for both sides, the sharp and the square action, to kind of be on the good side or on the wrong side of COVID. And I think that's the way this one has gone. It hasn't affected, the betting trend in the game. Literally all of the money has been for Green Bay. We're down to -7 right now, and I don't think that'll surprise anyone. It'll be the same way come kickoff.
And I don't want to play spoiler in this game, John, because we haven't previewed it yet, but our listeners know that Payne has a slight affinity for San Francisco starting quarterback Nick Mullins. So we'll see if his man crush comes out and becomes apparent when we hit on this one. But Payne, I'll flip the baton to you to fire the real hard-hitting questions at John.
Yeah, no, it's not too hard-hitting, but just this morning as well, we saw a staff member from the Colts test positive, so I believe they're going remote as well today. Anything else that you're seeing in terms of Giant liability past the Green Bay Packers this week? And again, any sharp action? I know our listeners love to hear where some of the sharp action's coming in.
In terms of sharp action, there's been a few. I would definitely say Tennessee. We saw sharp money on them at -5.5. The Jaguars +7, probably one that surprised me a little bit. And then we also took some money on the Dolphins. Our biggest position this week in terms of our own stance would be we're really wary of that weather report in Kansas City and the high winds. So we're really trying to shade the under in that game. That's probably the one I would offer that we thought made most sense. Let me just take a look at the Jet game and just see what way the money's gone on that, because they're usually a good starting point for who's been fading them. It's about 2.5 to 1 in favor of New England at -7 right now. So we are still seeing a bit of money on that game, and I actually think this is a good spot for the Jets. I'd be taking them for the first time all season if I was kind of forced to bet in this game. I just think it's an interesting spot for New England. I think it's an interesting spot for them with a look ahead to next year's draft. Even their potential to recover from this start is gone now, and the season's pretty much over for them, and the offense is so anemic. And I think we've seen steady improvement from the Jets since Darnold's come back. Everyone's telling me be wary of Belichick, but it hasn't helped them the last couple of weeks, although they did cover last week. But I still thought they were pretty poor. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch, I would say.
Hopefully Sam Darnold isn't seeing ghosts this year, Todd.
Yeah, you can only hope that he's able to take a positive step forward. And hearing John advocate for this potentially being a spot where the Jets are live underdogs, you can understand when you look at the success of home underdogs, especially in the division. I think there's only one loss so far this campaign. So one of those trends that, whether it's an anomaly or it seems to resonate and hold true going forward, will definitely be interesting to try and watch. But the weather forecast, Payne, I leave playing meteorologist to John, his team, and you. I just assume it's going to be blue skies and sunshine everywhere that they decide to play an NFL football game on Sundays.
John, I was a little surprised. Did you see, you mentioned that Carolina, Kansas City total actually got popped over 51. We're now out to about 52 at your shop. Is that where you guys are sitting?
Yeah, let me just take a look at exactly what the number is right now. The only other one I would say is the Steelers. Obviously, kind of, you wouldn't need to be a genius to figure out that all of the public money will come on that side with the mess that is the Dallas Cowboys. That's an incredibly lopsided book, and I would imagine will end up being the biggest one of the week. It's basically 15-1 in favor of the Steelers right now, and I don't expect to see that extend. The total's 52.5. We actually opened it at 50.5. So it's popped up with that 2-point swing. But like I said, I think we're minus 115 to the under at 52.5 now, Payne, and probably one we'll continue to shade until it kind of drops down a bit again. We just feel it's just a little bit too high.
Makes sense with the wind coming in.
Go ahead, Payne. I didn't want to cut you up.
No, go for it.
No, last but not least, John, obviously the marquee game of the weekend is a showdown between two familiar foes in the NFC South. How's the wagering looked in terms of handle and where you guys have gone in terms of a back and forth with Tampa Bay playing host to New Orleans?
Yeah, I think obviously a huge match for both of them. We didn't see an awful lot of money in this game really yet to this point. I think the fact that the Buccaneers kind of struggled with the Giants will probably mean that a lot of the money that we'll see from the public will be on New Orleans. We are shading them slightly in terms of where we sit versus the win or versus the market. And then there is, I think, potential from weather perspective that we're tracking for wind and rain in that game in Tampa as well. Seems to be the case at this time of year, always in Tampa, there's potential for wind and rain on a Thursday, and I'm not sure it always materializes given how volatile the weather is down there, but definitely seeing a bias towards the Saints in this spot. I think it was 4.5 from 5.5, and like I said, we're still leaning towards New Orleans in the way that we're booking the game.
Always interesting stuff. And when you look at a Sunday slate like this with only a couple of marquee games, we know folks will be plowing into the Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers, trying to run it into Sunday Night Football before that lovely game that we'll be treated to on Monday night between the Jets and Patriots. John, always want to thank you for your time. We know you are a busy man this time of year. Look forward to having you back on same time, same place next week.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good weekend.
It's always interesting, Payne, and I'm glad we get a chance to talk to John every Thursday to get a better understanding of exactly where they're seeing liabilities, knowing that the Flutter Group feels comfortable taking positions on games. And I don't think it comes as any surprise that they're going to be huge Dallas Cowboys fans come Sunday afternoon.
No, not at all. The Cooper combination this week, Rush and Amari, seems to be what they are praying on.
Do we think it's going to be Cooper, or do you think it's who's eating Gilbert Grape that's going to get the snaps?
The AAF legend. Where did he play ball? One of the Texas schools, right?
I want to say wasn't it Texas and SMU? Didn't he play both?
It's very possible.
I don't know if he went the Shane Buechele path. I'm trying to remember exactly. It was definitely some Texas in there, but I don't feel he finished his whole career there. But yes, he was an AAF icon for the short-lived tenure of that spring football league. So we'll see exactly what direction Dallas goes, and hopefully he can help save John and the FanDuel's team's bacon come Sunday in that particular spot. And as we've talked about at great lengths, Big Ben and Mike Tomlin, they're not afraid to lay a dud on the road after two emotional and physical football games against Tennessee and Baltimore.
They have played to the level of their competition over the years in spots like this. That's for sure.
That is a very diplomatic way to answer things. I'm proud of how far you've come. Thursday,
SMU and Texas.
All right, my memory's not as bad as it once was. I'm trying to bring it back, Payne.
6th round pick in 2014 of the St. Louis Rams.
Didn't he have? He threw a couple NFL passes for as a member of the Browns, I want to say, or maybe that was preseason.
I believe so. And he stuck around the league because he doesn't have the best arm, but he seems to know where the ball needs to go pre-snap, and he's been semi-accurate. He absolutely crushed the AAF and got interest again in the league. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But have they announced? I thought it was Cooper Rush.
No, Jerry came out earlier. I haven't seen an official announcement, but I haven't poked around this morning. And I know it's not a game, and I'm completely going off on a tangent. When we watch the Cowboys, what's wrong with Ezekiel Elliott? I mean, does he just not have a desire or want to play the game? Is he out of shape? I mean, have we seen the best of Zeke at this point?
First of all, I'm reading here, but you're right. We talked about this. I was like, why aren't they starting Garrett Gilbert? So apparently it is going to come down to who is better at practice, but they just said we need more experience at quarterback. So it'll be interesting who they start. I'd actually prefer Gilbert, I think. In terms of Zeke, one, the offensive line in front of him isn't what he's been accustomed to. And that's been the biggest thing. You lose 4 of like the 5 horsemen up front there that he's been running behind at the early stage of his career. Martin's missed some time, although he came back last week past the concussion protocol. But yeah, I mean, just, I don't know. He does look a little defeated. Let's just put it that way. He got the big money, struggling to hold on to the football a little bit. If I'm a coach, by the way, the long baggy sleeves after the fumbling problem, like he'd never wear long sleeves again if I were the coach.
Yeah,
that's neither here nor there.
You need those contact points on your arm to know exactly where that football is.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think you got a payday, and obviously the offensive line just is a shell of itself. I mean, that was where they allocated a lot of their money. That's what they based their team around. And the offensive line just isn't very good right now. The players aren't there.
And for those scoring at home, COVID alert around the Chicago Bears, as they just tweeted out after learning Thursday that another player tested positive for COVID-19. We have closed Hallis Hall and released the following statement. I will not read the entire statement, but keep tabs on the Bears-Titans game in terms of how certain players could or could not be impacted for Chicago's trip down to Nashville. But we do have a game tonight, Payne, and we thought it was going to be fully in jeopardy throughout the course of the week. That, of course, being Green Bay's trip out to the West Coast to take on the 49ers. And Green Bay, a 7.5-point favorite at FanDuel. Total on this game, 48.5. The Packers depleted at the running back position. We're not quite sure if Aaron Jones will be able to go, but we know most of his running mates will be out for this one, with the exception of Tyler Ervin. Meanwhile, on the other side, San Francisco, I think they're going to call in the Truly Seltzer vendor, a peanut guy, and someone who's spinning churros and funnel cakes up there at Levi Stadium to get them out there as viable receiving weapons for Nick Mullins, as no George Kittle, no Deebo Samuel, no Brandon Ayuk, and the list continues.
Trent Williams is out as well at left tackle. Did you regurgitate a tweet that you sent?
No, a tweet that I sent
to the podcast.
No,
I heard. I feel like I've seen you talk about a peanut boy.
Oh, I did make a joke that I did make a joke that the peanut vendor was going to finally get some reps for the 49ers. I did make that joke. It was a bad joke then, and it's a bad joke now, so I had to make it twice.
Did you get the feedback you were looking for from the tweet? It must have turned out well.
No, it didn't turn out well. None of my tweets turn out well. Let's call a spade here, buddy.
I just figured you implemented it here on the podcast. It must have been a solid tweet.
No, I use bad jokes.
No.
My goal is to employ bad jokes repeatedly, hoping they catch on.
So the biggest thing here is it comes down to the number, and I thought we might have a chance to let this leak out a little bit, but someone's got an itchy trigger finger here as we break this down, taking the 7.5 now. But
Jesus, soft 7 right now in the market. Lovely.
Initially, coming into the week, it was like, hey, this could be the spot here, or at least last week when I looked at it, this could be the spot here with the old double revenge from last season. If we can get Green Bay like +1, which is what the look ahead was, San Francisco -1, you might be onto something. Now you're looking at 7.5. We've gone through the 3, the 4, the 6, and the 7. There's value on San Francisco at this point, and as John indicated, at 4.5, they saw professional money, and that professional money was understanding that Garoppolo was out, that Tevin Coleman was out, that Kittle was out. The only change we've had since that time is Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk that are real impact players, and I get it. You don't want to use your left tackle. That's a premium position. Brandon Ayuk is certainly coming into his own, and when you have Kittle out, when you have Deebo out, the Ayuk value obviously increases as well, but I don't think Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk are worth 3 points through the 6 and the 7. So we're seeing that now come to fruition as we pod live. I don't know whether it's the matchup or whether Kyle Shanahan understands a motion offense because that's what he likes to employ. But the one thing that we saw in the 2 matchups last season was San Francisco's defense did a phenomenal job locking down the Packers. Now, I don't think we are going to see that level of defense, obviously, with a lot of key cogs out along the defensive line for San Francisco. But it could just be a matchup thing. We'll see. If you go back to Week 12 last year, Green Bay had 2.8 yards per play and a 31% success rate. Aaron Rodgers went for 1.9 yards per pass attempt and a 26% passing success rate.
That's
in the
not very
first
good.
Matchup in Week 12.
That's not very good.
Not good. And then you double down and you play each other in the conference championship game, and it was 27-0 at half. So the full game numbers don't look too bad as San Francisco played prevent, but if you just dig into the first half, when the Packers threw up the bagel, Green Bay had 3 yards per pass attempt and a 29% passing success rate in the second meeting. Now, obviously, again, San Francisco isn't as good, but they are still getting good pressure on quarterbacks, 6th in pressure rate. They've been forced to blitz a little bit more because of those defensive line injuries. But I'm not sure that Green Bay is going to go out here and just throw it all over the park, especially you mentioned their running back issues. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. We know where you want to attack San Francisco. It's with a premier number 1 receiver down the field. We'll see if Devontae Adams can provide that. But aside from that, this isn't like an overwhelmingly poor matchup for San Francisco's defense, I don't think. And that's why, again, we're seeing the number taken here. The other side of the ball, you're going to need the ground game to get going. Shorten this game if you're San Francisco's offense. Get hasty going. We know the 49ers are 6th in rushing efficiency. The Packers' defense is not very good this season for whatever reason. And they've had trouble stopping run. And the one spot that they've had trouble stopping run is the outside zone, which is where Shanahan likes to run the ball. You also look with Nick Mullins coming in here, Todd. You're hoping for a game that's a little bit more comfortable. It certainly hurts that his left tackle is out for this game. But really the disappointing part about the Packers defense is we knew they couldn't really stop the run, but it was a team that was built to play with a lead so they would get pressure, and the secondary was the best part of their defense. Well, right now, the Packers are 31st in pressure rate. They've only pressured quarterbacks 17% of the time. So I don't know where the Smith brothers have been, but it just hasn't worked. The other thing that we know Kyle Shanahan likes to employ is 2 tight end sets. And I get Kittle is out, but we might see Ross Dwelly. There's some rumors that potentially Jordan Reed may show up here. He's been limited at practice. If he can't go, we'll see how limited they are with their 2 tight end sets. But if Kyle Shanahan is actually able to employ the 2 tight end sets here, that could work because Green Bay's allowed a 63% passing success rate, a 124 passer rating. They've also given up 4.6 a carry from 2 tight end sets. So the matchup here, at least stylistically, there's something here that bodes well for San Francisco. And I think when you kind of compare that, or I guess combine that rather, with the inflated number here is why we're seeing pros here grab the 7.5, Todd, on Thursday morning.
You mentioned the situational spot at the top of the handicap and how obviously we had looked to identify Green Bay, thought it was going to be a great opportunity with the double revenge. How does that play in, or right now with the numbers so out of whack, approaching a touchdown at most shops, that's more than built into this particular price tag?
Right, price. Price is the number one thing in any market, right? It's like, great, I want to go buy that car. Well, then you get to the lot and it's an 8x of what you expected to spend. You're not going to do it, right?
Hey, thanks for making a car joke with my car sitting in the garage with a flat tire. I appreciate it, you dick.
The run flats, baby. The run flats.
Yeah, I was actually looking up the run flats in terms of what that means. Apparently, I can drive up to 50 miles at 0 PSI as long as I don't go more than 50 miles an hour. I may have to gamble a little bit later and try and get that puppy filled.
There you go. You're a gambler. So that's basically what this has come down to. The mindset has changed a little bit based upon the price. And that's really what it is. I was hoping that this would leak out to the dead zone territory, maybe even squeak up to 9.5, and I could get a nice 10 minus 15 on the buy for San Francisco. It's just someone had an itchy trigger finger here for some reason.
Right now,
and grabbed the 7.5.
I was to say I'm seeing more 6.5s out there. Not quite sure our pipe dream of getting it where we really want it to go is going to come to roost.
Let's not get carried away. You have a tough time reading the screen a little bit sometimes.
I'm looking around. I see some.
There's 2 6.5s.
That's still something 6.5. Yeah, I know there's some 7.5s out. I mean, there's numbers all over the place because we know books are going to have liability, like John told us on this particular spot. So it'll be interesting to see how much professional money comes in and how they ultimately decide to set a number here and where they stick for this game as it gets closer to kickoff.
We have a really good relationship reading lines. When Todd sends me a game, it's available in like one place, and then when I send him a game, it's available in like 97 places, and then he still bitches about the number.
Here we go. Yeah, you really want to go there? Do you really want to go there with this particular situation?
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I'm going to take it's available for public consumption, so I can't even defend myself at this point. All right,
It's a good-natured back and forth with the screen.
Yeah, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Every now and again, it's somewhere in between. But either way, we've covered 4 NFL football games, 3 of the biggest on Sunday, and of course Thursday night football. I've actually politicked Payne for us to take Monday off, but I'm not sure that's going to be allowed because I don't really want to break down New England and the Jets. But, for our listeners out there, we might carve out 12 minutes total. We'll run through the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll run through look-ahead lines, and we'll run a 2-minute drill on Cam Newton against the Jets. And Bill Belichick throwing ultimate shade on the Jets, saying, well, they look better this year than they did last year. I'm not quite sure what the takeaway is from that particular side.
A lot of people are saying that. Chris Jones came out and said this is a really, really good football team. They just don't have any wins.
Well, maybe the Jets are going to break through then, or they're trying to do everything they can, like Bill Belichick being the smart, savvy veteran he is, to try and keep Adam Gase's job so they can beat the Jets 2 times a year in perpetuity.
The key here is if you're Bill Belichick, and I'm being dead honest with you, and this is coming obviously as a Dolphins fan, but Bill should let them win this game. Because not only does it help your draft stock, but it potentially negates the possibility of playing Trevor Lawrence 2 times a year. And I'm being dead serious about this. I know that's not in Bill's DNA, but I'm throwing this game.
Jarrett Stidham.
I don't want to see Trevor Lawrence 2 times a year for the next 15 years.
Give Stidham the start. Let him out there. Let Jared get out there and chuck it all over the yard. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. You can follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And, of course, you can follow John Sheeran on social media, too. But, Payne, we have one last thing to try and do before we close up shop and we take our 72-hour sabbatical from one another and our listeners. It's identifying where we're going to go for a best bet in the National Football League, since Saturday is suddenly anticlimactic from a Bet the Board perspective.
I don't really love anything, as I said at the top of the show, but the one thing that I have bet that is still widely available.
Hold on, I'm checking. Is it available at 9 sportsbooks after the shot you just took at me? Let me see. 1, 2. Okay.
It's available at all yours, that's for sure.
Well, I live in Fantasyland out here in the desert. We've gone through that a number of times.
You do live in Fantasyland. That is pretty funny. So, rotation number 467. We're going to go over the 52 in the Raiders-Chargers game. I think there's a lot of value in this one. If you look at what the Chargers are doing offensively now, they've handed the keys to the car to Justin Herbert. If you look the first 5 weeks prior to the bye, the Chargers were throwing on first down at about a 41% clip. That number on early downs now is about 10% higher. So they're allowing Justin Herbert to do a little bit more. Obviously, he is a dynamic passer. The explosive pass game has increased as well. I think there's a couple guys along the O-line that are going to get upgraded for the Raiders. I think you have a suppressed total here based upon last week's game where the Raiders went out to Cleveland and it was an absolute windstorm, 40-mile-per-hour gusts that ends 16-6. So you're getting a little suppression here in the total. Fast track, obviously, in the new stadium there for the Chargers. And when you just kind of look at some of these games, Todd, with who the Raiders have played, and I know a lot of people value the Chargers defense. To me, it's a middle-of-the-pack defense. But you're looking at other games, right? Kansas City's great pass defense. It's 72 points in that game. Against Tampa Bay's defense, like 65 points in that game. Neither of those defenses are to the level, or the Chargers' defense is not to the level of either of those. We made the game 55. So let's go over the 52. That's the one thing that we have bet this week that's still widely available. Rare full game over on Bet the Board.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could probably count on one hand how many full game overs we've given out in this podcast in the 5 years we've been doing this.
Yeah, rare.
Yeah. Well,
not really our element, but here we are.
Hey, and just for the record, after you made that jab about 6.5s, the most important book of all is currently at 6.5 right now. Our presenting sponsor at FanDuel. 6.5. The prevailing price minus $1.12. So quiet down over there.
That is why you are a professional. Got the little plug in there. I like it.
It's what we do around here. We take care of our own.
Yes, we do.
Do you have anything else you want to share with our listeners?
I may actually take a nap this afternoon. I'm zapped.
You're not a nap guy. What's going on here?
I'm not. It's literally naps are against my religion. I'm kidding. But I don't nap. It's not me. I don't really do.
Are we going like a 90
either?
Are we going like a 90-minute nap? Are we going like a 4.5-hour knockout session where you get up at halftime and see that Nick Mullins has 3 touchdowns and 200 yards passing?
Anything worth doing is worth doing right in my book. So typically I'm a long napper, but the problem is it's going to distort the sleep schedule moving forward. So I may just tough it out and go to bed a little bit earlier today. No nap.
Look at you, soldiering on. A man of the people, pushing forward during this topsy-turvy college football and National Football League season. Payne,
we are navigating as best we can. We're trying.
We're
just happy. We're just happy football's here. That's it. You don't want to complain about it.
No, we're not going to complain. Right? We can laugh and know that it provides challenges, but no different than what everybody's doing in their day-to-day. I mean, the stuff that we have to deal with in the gambling world pales in comparison, quite frankly.
Of course, right. I mean, I love spending like 8 hours on a game and then having it taken off the board. It's a good day.
Well, especially in college football, because we know that's your true passion when it comes to handicapping.
Yes, it is. It is my true passion. It's my calling.
For Payne Insider, I'm Todd Furman. Best of luck with all of your NFL wagers for Week 9. And with an over ticket in the Raiders and Chargers game come Sunday afternoon, we'll see you at the window.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.